Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer will not be part of today's profile. Ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, thanks for tuning into MST.TV. This is Tombox, and I did it. I have completed the entire Swordsoul core in real fashion. There's not a single proxy in here, and I want to give a huge shout out to Marcus for hooking me up with all of these cards so early. It would be impossible without Marcus because I don't know if I was going to get that lucky cracking a case. So, huge shout out to you. Now, in this video, I'm going to share with you guys my basically foundational deck list for you guys to maybe copy or edit out, whatever you want to do. I'm not the boss of you. I'm also going to look at some bread and butter plays just quickly so that we can jump into some competitive notes and even review a replay or two, just so that we can get a more in-depth look at this. Now, unlike the Wanderers, I haven't been playing that deck as much as Swordsoul. Swordsoul, I've been playing this for like about a month and a half. I proxied the whole thing and I just decided to take it to the locals. I decided to try it out online on the stream a lot. I mean, I think that was like the first couple of streams too. So that was really exciting. I'm going to share with you guys my finding. And I got to play against Pack really early on, and I also got to test against Shu. And this is basically the accumulation of all that knowledge put into the current build of the deck. If you guys want to acquire early proxy access to upcoming competitive archetypes, you guys can check it out on my Patreon, link down in the description. Brave token stuff is already available. And if you guys want to prepare for the upcoming YCS, maybe that's something that you want to look into and stay ahead of the curve, well, you guys can do so with the link in the description. Now remember that the Ultimate Counter Guide is coming out very soon, so make sure you guys smash thumbs up on this video and help me beat the algorithm gods by hitting the subscribe button so that it reduces life points down to 0 and it turns gray. And then you'll be up to date when the next Ultimate Counter Guide comes in, or the next coming profile within this current meta. And let's begin. So Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, we're choosing not to run it for two reasons. One, it's a little bit more budget friendly, and even without it, I think it's actually fine, and there's some liabilities that get removed by not playing that card. So starting off with the main deck here, we are playing triple Swordsoul of Moye. This card is one of the most essential starters in the entire deck, and not only that, it also provides you with additional draw. Just to give you guys a TLDR of all the Swordsoul monster effects, whenever you synchro summon them off as synchro material, they will have a trigger effect that's activated in the graveyard, and they all have a token summoning effect, which is a little bit different on each one. But to generate the token that is a tuner level 4 water worm, while that token is on the field, you cannot basically use your extra deck unless you're performing a synchro summoning. So there's a restriction on the token itself, but once it's removed, you're no longer locked under. Now, Moye, it provides you with additional draw when it's synchroed off as a material, and on the summon, the only thing you need to do is reveal. So ideally, this is your key starter, and this is on normal or special summon, so even if you use Ecclesia into this card, it still works. The thing about the Swordsoul archetype is that it's very difficult for them to actually gain additional cards. Now, there's two ways to gain it. One's through Moye and the other is through Chishao. Every other way is kind of like an even trade. And this deck requires you to play with 2 cards at all times to generate that token. And if you're unable to do so, if you're top decking, it's never a good look for this deck. So that's why Moye is a 3 of, and hopefully it can help you maintain hand size, keep your hand size nice and healthy. Next, we have Taya. Taya, we're only playing 2 copies of this because we don't really want to see it in our opening hand. It is pretty bad going first because all it is an 18 beat stick unless you can load your graveyard with additional names such as a worm monster or a Swordsoul card. That's what you have to reveal or discard, whatever. That's essentially the key component to generating the token. This one lets you Foolish Burial whenever you synchro it off, which is pretty decent. It helps you crack boards, helps you load the grave so that you can set up bigger plays. But Taya is a 2 for me. And it does break if you do play 3 of sometimes, but you know what? It's up to you if you want to play 3. Next, we have the Swordsoul Strategist Longyan. This is the one that synchros into 10. In terms of terminology I'm going to use, there is going to be the 8-10, which means I synchro into an 8 and then synchro into a 10. That is 8-10. And this is the one that generates the synchro 10. Your synchro range is going to be between 7 to 10 because you can modulate levels if you banish spell cards with Taya. Taya is capable of doing so, and in that case you can go into some weirder numbers, and there is one monster that does require an alternate number to go into. But Longyan, synchro it off, you burn your opponent for 12, so you can win in the time game, making also the reach of the deck only needing to hit 6,800 life points. All the monsters you summon are pretty big, so it's really easy to achieve lethal with the deck. So Longyan also generates the token by discarding a Swordsoul card or a worm monster, which is really easy. And it does activate and it does generate, but then you can go into 10, which is your Baroness summoner, your Chenying summoner, your Ruddy Row summoner. Next, we're going into our extender, or one of the other openers. We have the incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous. This thing has just a ton of effects. Summon wise, you have a special summon condition similar to Pancratops. Your opponent controlling more monster than you can special summon this. No activation required. That's a good plus. It's a tuner. In other words, you can bypass using the token in case you get stuck under like a token collector. There's just so much going for this card. And you can also tribute this card. And you get to summon out a Swordsoul monster from the deck. So this is your Lone Fire Blossom that is special summonable and just has a ton of other effects to go with it. And if a fusion monster is sent to the graveyard, you get to add this card back to your hand during the end phase. Really big power play. Now we go into some of the bigger techs. We play Tenyi Spirit Vishuda. I still consider myself as a pure build even with these two Vishudas. It's just so free. If there's a Baroness on board, summon this card out. Now the Baroness is more or less taken care of. That's how good this is, because what are they gonna do? Negate this and pop it? Well, this will eventually get the point where you get to bounce your opponent's card. So, and it can also help you clear some back row and make it a lot more safe. Then we play hand traps, we play triple Ash Blossom. There's just a lot of things that you probably want to hit. It's really hard to hit the Swordsoul deck in particular, but you can hit the Pot of Desires, Pot of Prosperity. You can hit the Fusion Destiny, Shaddoll Fusion. Against other decks, this is always viable. That's why we're playing Ash. Then we're playing 2 Nibiru. I'm choosing to play 2 Nibiru. Not only is it a really good cross-out designator target, but it's also pretty good in the mirror. And there's a lot of matchups this works against. You can work it against like Live Twins. You can work it against Drytron's Tri-Brigade Lyroless. A little bit more iffy on that last one I just mentioned, but ultimately it's there to crack the board. If they do 8-10, you're guaranteed to be able to crack the board unless they have cross-out designator. And looking at a lot of people's deck lists, they don't even have this in the main deck. So even if they have cross-out designator, this will still probably stick as of now. I'm not sure if people are going to adapt in the future, but 8-10 is the most common opening that you're going to see. So the Nibiru dropping on them and having them actually commit materials and monsters, that is actually going to sting them a lot. And we just need to find some way to actually clear off that token, because that token is actually going to be pretty thick. And finally, we have Effect Failure. This is just a cross-out designator target, and one of the big weaknesses of the deck is that you oversaturate yourself with hand traps or stuff that's not Swordsoul. Remember, this is a 2-card combo deck. You need 2 pieces for it to work, and if you have 4 like I guess control cards plus 1 piece, it doesn't feel very good. And that's one of the biggest limitations of the deck, so that you can't really oversaturate yourself. You should probably focus more on breaking the board, considering you already have Ecclesia that kind of leads you in that direction, which means it's actually not a bad choice to choose to go for board breaking techs. Okay, for spells, let's start with Crossout Designator, the card that makes my deck ratios a bit more wonky than normal, but I'm going to play to the strengths of the deck and some of the weaknesses of the deck, which is maintaining a 2-card combo hand, and oversaturation is a bad thing. Even if I play Desires in this deck with like 1-ups for like stuff for crossout targets, I think it's okay. If you play into a mirror match, which is probably going to be likely, these are still going to be live, especially with your regular main deck stuff. So there's that going for it, even if you do lose some of the key cards there. So anyways, that kind of explains itself. Next, we have Swordsoul Emergence, Triple Rhoda. I don't need to explain this card because it's one of the best cards and lets you open Taya and make a play. Next, we have Triple Pot of Desires. Now, unlike Prosperity, this card still allows you to draw cards afterwards. And here's the liability I want to really mention here. If you play Pot of Prosperity, you get to dig further. That's true. However, Moye does not get to activate anymore, which means if you synchro into Qishao, Qishao is now susceptible to get hit by Ash. And normally it would not happen, but if you're under Prosperity, let's just say that Qishao is a bit of a sitting duck, and you're not recovering cards. You're playing from behind at that point, and I'm not really a big fan of that. And the reason why you have to play Pot of Prosperity with the Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer is that if you do banish like a Destiny Hero piece, all those Fusion Destinies become completely dead, and therefore you can't take that risk. And because you can't take that risk, you have to play Pot of Prosperity, and that's kind of like, you know, the risk and reward that you're kind of going after. Next, I'll play 1 copy of Swordsoul Sacred Summit. You can increase it up to another one, but it's not really a great card in the opening turn because putting a Swordsoul monster in the grave is pretty difficult. Next, I play Triple Tactics Talent. I played 3 before. Man, oh my god. Let's just say Shu has taught me why he doesn't like Triple Tactics talent. It can get bricky if your opponent chooses to play around it and your hand is loaded with them. It does not feel very good. But if you do resolve this, and you're worried about your opponent actually outplaying you and you already have like 1 or 2 disruption, rip their hand apart. Look at their hand and find something to rip. And maybe you get lucky, you can completely end their turn. If you're not lucky, then they'll be able to play through it because they just top deck the perfect card. Next, we play triple Forbidden Droplet. We're playing to crack boards here. This also helps you load a card into the graveyard to help Taya get the start up and maybe turn off some of the threats, which is why I highly recommend finding some way to break a board. And we're going to be focusing on board breaking. Like Vishudas are good for board breaking. Triple Tactics is also really good for board breaking as well. And then we have the 1 copy of Instant Fusion. I'm choosing to play Instant Fusion over the Gold Sark. Gold Sark does not solve the problem of Token Collector. Token Collector on the board, I can't play Gold Sark to out it, but I can Instant Fusion to out it pretty easily, in fact. So that's why this is there, and it also gives you a little bit of synergy with the Ecclesia. So into the trap cards, we have 1 Infinite Impermanence. Sounds really weird because it's just there for cross-out designator target. Because I'm not looking forward to negating with an imperm to stun your opponent. I mean, it's an option. If you have it, you drew into it, you have it. But ultimately, I want to use my other cards to crack the board and just take a win from there. And I want to be able to stop my opponent from stopping me. That's why the imperm is here. Even if it gets banned, it's not really that big of a deal. I know it seems really weird running a 1-of, but if you get 2 or 3 imperms and like a Veiler in your hand and like a cross-out designator, let me tell you, that particular ratio feels really, really whack, and you just pass turn even though it's just your own deck building problem now. Next, we have double Solemn Warning over the Solemn Strike. Negating Fusion Destiny is important, and anything that Solemn Strike would take care of, well, you can use your monsters to take care of it. You have Chi Shao that can negate monsters, you have Baroness. In other words, stopping the summon is just as good. And it's very difficult to stop a Fusion Destiny, so the Warning does get a chance to negate that, and that's a pretty good start. Then we also have 2 Blackouts, just to pop cards, additional control. It's really good. Starting off with the extra deck essentials, we have 2 Chi Shaos. I recommend playing 2 at all times because if you only play 1, you'll never be able to go into your turns 3, 4, and 5 successfully because you are running out of gas really quickly. And this is the only card that maintains gas in the extra deck. Next, we have Baroness de Fleur. This is your Omni Negator, and you can put it back into your deck when you don't need her, and then you can summon her out again. And remember, it's once per turn while she's face up, and she also pops cards on the field. Don't forget to activate that effect in case you need it. Then we have more toolbox monsters. We need a non-targeting monster, and we have one that basically does a spin, and they both are able to summon out word monsters. This one summons from the graveyard by popping a card. This one, if it pops itself, summons one from the deck. Really useful, and you get the proc effects like your Moye. Then we have a big beater. This is the one that takes care of the big problems. We have Draco Berserker, the Tenyi, and if your opponent activates a monster effect, that monster gets banished. It's pretty brutal, and it's also very, very useful for running over a lot of cards. Next, we have something that's not worm related. We have Adamancer Risen Dragite. Dragite's there to negate spells and traps because Moye is a water, and because I run Nibiru, I do have the option to spin away cards. And we play 1 copy of Ruddy Rose Dragon to take care of Drytron, to take care of any of the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcers in the graveyard, and yeah, even in some mirror matches, it's actually pretty decent. But just remember that this is a high commitment card. When you use it, you lose your own graveyard as well. So make sure that if you're going to be using it, it better be worth its value. And for Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer, absolutely, because your opponent's forcing themselves to empty out their hand to use Celestial to draw. This takes away their Celestial, and it just feels oh so good. Then we have 1 copy of Monk of the Tenyi just so that your Vishudas can activate and bounce without any problem and just without any other cards interacting with it. Now we go into the optional slot. You don't have to play these cards, and essentially these are the cards that gets replaced by the Phoenix Enforcer and like the Predaplant stuff if you really want to play that stuff. We have the SSS Chenying. In a Simplified Game State, I would love this card because I think it's a little bit better than Baroness in Simplified Game State, where if your opponent needs to recover by banishing, they get punished for banishing. This card can protect itself from card effect destruction by just banishing a card, and that will also proc its banishing effect. This is really good, and for every banished card, of course, your opponent is basically getting Kagari Shizuku. Everything is getting lowered while you are gaining everything. Really good. Then there's Cyframe Lord Omega. If you go into an 8-10-8 board, I recommend going to Omega over the Dragite because you're going to rip a card out of your opponent's hand first, and in case they do have Dark Ruler no more, at least Omega will come back and you get to make a bit of a recovery, and maybe you get to whack something as well. As for the rest of these guys, we have Instant Fusion Target, Magic Key, and Ziala Bolas. We have number 41 Baguska, the Terribly Tired Tapir. We have Wind, the Wind Charmer. This card is so good. Oh my god, this card, I got killed by it so many times to the point that, you know what, I'm gonna have to run it now. It's it can revive Baroness. So in other words, if you bait Baroness and you use this to steal Baroness, well, GG. You steal your opponent's Baroness, pop a card, make a win, now get another Baroness back from your opponent's graveyard. So that's pretty brutal. And then we have Nightmare Phoenix or Nightmare Cerberus, whichever one. You can play Cerberus in case you are stuck against like a big Nibiru token. It does come up from time to time. For the combo portion, I'm going to hit 2 birds with 1 stone here. We're going to analyze a replay and basically do the entire combo here because it's very standard. And in this particular hand, as you can see, this is what I always worry about, oversaturation of like other cards that aren't Sword Soul, because Sword Soul alone, they don't really do anything. And this is against Prank Kids. I want to give a shout out to another player that I did play against, KLO, because he was playing a mirror match, and I will showcase that replay as well. It's really neat, and you'll see some of the problems that come up by oversaturation. Starting off with my turn, I got go Pot of Desires, draw into an Ecclesia. Ecclesia essentially lets me go into Moye, and this is the standard start of the play. You go into Moye, that special summon, activate Moye's effect, and we're going to reveal to our opponent the Longyan, and that's going to send him out our first token. First token goes in Chi-Sha Moye, draw 1 and search a card. Hopefully that will get you into a Longyan, and you just want to basically perform the 8-10 board right here. It's very much possible because here's the 8 and there's the 10, and then you get to burn your opponent, and that's why you reduce the range to 68, and hitting your opponent right here, you're at 58, 1,000 more, and that's lethal, and that's why it's really brutal. Now what makes the board so scary is not just the front row, but the back row. For every card that they have, you can expect that they can 1-for-1 trade you, and therefore you need to go for trades that are pluses or makes your opponent neg. And we're going to continue. We're going to pass turn to our Prank Kids opponent. He's going to start off with Prank Kids Place. He's going to try to do as much as he can. He can also block me off with the Parallel Exceeds. He activates his polymerization, and considering that I don't know what he has in his hand, we're choosing to use the Solemn Warning to turn it off. So in other words, it's kind of like them having the correct fusion. I mean, if he does successfully fuse, it would have spelled a huge amount of trouble for me, because I'm going to have to probably deal with 3 chain links there, and that's not something I want to eat. So now I'm forcing him to go into a normal summon play, and he goes into basically a multi-chain link play here, going to Parallel Exceeds, summoning a monster from Fansies, and I'm going to kill off the Parallel Exceeds because I do not want him to actually have another monster to follow up. Now he goes into Dodo Doodle Doo. I'm going to negate that Dodo Doodle Doo, but he's still going to generate another one, and I'm trying to minimize the options for my opponent to actually fill his graveyard with something useful like Pandemonium, and that's the entire focus of this, holding him down, not letting him get there. He's going to try to get it back a couple of cards. In my opinion, his hand's really dead right now because I know most of it at the very least, and the Droplet's still alive. I still have my monsters. I'm not really worried about my opponent kind of killing me. He activates Plan for no apparent reason, and I got myself an Ecclesia back, and Ecclesia lets me cycle the card, and I can basically go into Baroness again if I needed to. Now I'm gonna go in. I am a little bit concerned for Nibiru, which is why I went for a Omega. In case he does have a Nibiru, I can use Omega to kind of fly myself off the board, and just kind of worried about that later. And I loaded my graveyard as well with a Vishuda so that I can bounce a card. I'm going to bounce back his Prank Kids Plan because I'm just going to OTK him at this point, going to Chi-Sha. Chi-Sha can't negate any cards anymore. Draw a card. Ooh, Triple Tactics, which has also made me even more comfortable in case he did have Nibiru, and then I also get to add myself another card into my hand, which is the Revival card in case I don't get to do that follow-up. And that means I get to activate this to revive a card and just basically continue playing through a Nibiru, and that's kind of the gist of it. For this particular replay, we're gonna have a mirror match. I start with Emergence. There's no Ash, which means it's safe for the Moye. Apparently not. I get hit by a Veiler. I don't have Cross-Out Designator, so this gets negated, and we're just gonna proceed with this. Now, unfortunately, there's nothing really loaded for my grave. I could use a Taie, but I'm really afraid of my opponent just kind of like blasting through this, because if this gets negated, I'm not gonna have a way to generate a token for a long time. So I'm going to use Triple Tactics Talent. Look at my opponent's hand, and I can see that he has a Swordsoul appears, that is a guaranteed play. So I decided to remove that and force him to bank on luck to be able to do anything. He gets into a peak. That doesn't really help him. The Summit's not going to be able to revive any cards as yet. Goes into Vishuda. Again, this is the problem. He doesn't have any names, and not only that, his Pot of Desires banished a lot of the level 4 names. So what's left is that he has Taya, Longyan, one Moye. He's still pretty stacked up, pretty loaded. Unfortunately, this shuffle is not going to really help him out at all. So he goes into Vishuda, bounces back my drop. I don't know what was the point of that. Maybe he thought that I was going to play some back row removal. That part to me made no real sense. I perhaps could have summoned as well, but the thing is, if I did choose to normal summon the Taya, and then he uses the Imperm on me, I would have lost my only name, and then I can't even generate the token, and that part does not sit well with me, and I don't know how to put my monster into the graveyard either. So that's kind of the trade-off, and Vishuda can't bounce back my own cards, only bounces back the opponent's cards. So we're going to continue here with a Droplet and Imperm. He gets into another card because he decided to go second, hoping to crack the board, but this is a pretty smart play on his part, using the Gold Sark to banish the Blackout generating the token, and he decided to use this to pop off all the cards. Now he actually put a card into my graveyard, giving me 2 opportunities to actually use Taya's effect to generate tokens. So from this particular point, I actually bounce back the Imperm, which is, regardless, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because he gets to use it from hand. I'm going to normal summon out, he's going to use the Imperm. I didn't even banish a card yet, so I think he jumped the gun there. I hit him twice, and then I passed him. He's at 48, and I have a sudden shift. Now that he has his board set up, or rather his hand set up, he has the Summit, he has the Longyan, he can generate 2 monsters. Unfortunately, I also have my Blackout, and I'm ready to get rid of my Munkatenyi to pop both of these, and I'm going to activate it, pop both of these, and now he's left basically top decking because Dark Ruler does nothing at this point, and we're going to draw into an Emergence, although the Emergence is kind of a bit of an extra card now because Taya can generate all the plays on his own, and we're going to Chi-Shao, Taya. Taya is going to put the Surge Blackout into the graveyard, and now we get to use Longyan. Longyan can go into an 8-10 board, burn him, and then we can essentially just attack for game at this point. Okay, these are some of the cards that you guys can use against Swordsoul. I don't really want to expose it so early, but here we go. And Token Collector, being unable to grant the tuner, you won't be able to synchro, and with the synchros, you're playing a 1800 beast stick deck. It's not exactly the strongest, but Token Collector being able to constantly come back definitely throws a wrench in plans, and this is like the hard break half the time, to the point we have to actually address it in our main deck. Next, we have the Triple Tactics talent. If you activate, say, your Baroness, and then you Triple Tactics them, take their Baroness, and then pop a card, turn it into Verdant, revive the Baroness. It's you should win the game by that time because now you have a new negate on board. Then there's also Solemn Strike. Just strike out the Synchro Summon of the monster to prevent everything else from activating, like a Moye or stuff like that. Kaijus, I can't emphasize this enough. Kaijus are essentially Imperms that don't activate. Yeah, is that the right term? And it's permanent. Yes, let's say it. Let's put it that way. Because like, if you're gonna be imperming like a Chi-Shao or a Baroness, you might as well just throw a Kaiju on it. Because if you throw the Kaiju on it, it's essentially the same thing, and it doesn't even need to activate. And this particular Kaiju is really useful because if you get Barrier Statue, you can clear that Barrier Statue. It's pretty annoying against your opponent. And if your opponent only has an M-Pen, you want to throw this against them as well. But against Swordsoul, you can use this to act as like a 1-for-1, like an Imperm, and it's good for board breaking. And if you can play through it with the rest of your hand, then this is probably better than Imperm because this can't be negated. Drone Lockbird is kind of a 50-50 card if you hit at the right moment, such as like a pot card, like a Pot of Prosperity, Pot of Desires. If you hit any of those cards, then that means the Moye Chi-Shao will not be able to add, and that really hinders the hand recovery. And then I'm not even sure if they want to commit that hard into their own board because they're not recovering any resources, and every single card they play is a hard commitment, and it's a -1. And then there's Crimson Blader. Now, originally I did play Crimson Blader, but after playing against Shu, playing against Pack, playing against my locals, playing against some of you guys online, it's very difficult to actually summon out the Crimson Blader. If you're playing against a pro level player or a competitive player, they'll know never to leave a monster that's weaker than 28 on the board, or even if they do leave it on the board, they get banished so that they don't actually proc Crimson Blader. That is like one of the Crimson Blader's biggest limitations, is that it has to hit the graveyard, and it also cannot be destroyed along the way, so you can't just crash it into a 28 and call it a day. And this card typically gets negated all the time, and this card doesn't recover any resources for you. So it's a big limitation, but if you land it, you should be winning the game. Aside from just winning the game with Crimson Blader, I kind of want to mention that at locals, you should play this card. Not everyone is super competitive, so that you can definitely capitalize on weaker Sword Soul players that leave the wrong thing, like you effect failure, they leave some stuff on board, they don't protect it. Crimson Blader can probably win you the game, but it's not the end all. I've seen some Sword Soul builds go into Access Code Talker. I've seen them go into Baguska, into Zeus. These things do happen. And another really good card against you, Dark Ruler No More, because we don't really play the Imperial Order, so Dark Ruler is going to be pretty effective to take care of your front row, but that's why this deck has a lot of hand traps and a lot of back row, just so that you don't lose. It's a little bit like Drytron in that sense, because even if you Dark Ruler the entire board, they can still do a 2 negate on you and just call it a day and get their turn back. So even with Dark Ruler, you might not win the game. That's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash a thumbs up button. If you guys want to stay up to date with the upcoming videos with Ultimate Counter Guide and all the other awesome videos coming within this season of Yu-Gi-Oh!, smash that subscribe button, ding the notification bell, drain out its life points so it becomes like a gray subscribe button. That'd be really cool. And if you guys want to watch me or play against me on Twitch, check me out at MST.TV _Tombox. And you can play against me. I'll be playing this deck. I'll be playing a lot of other decks. I even have goats if you guys want to play goats. And that's all I got for this one. So hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.